Right on. Thanks for that introduction, Daryl. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we are excited to have you all here with us. We might have some more people joining since it's just now 11. If you're just hopping on, welcome. So my name is Erin. I'm the Erin of the Erin and Bryce.
And my name's Bryce. Nice to meet you all. Appreciate you all being out here with us.
Yeah, and as Daryl mentioned, we are one of the Subaru Leave No Trace teams. If you joined earlier and you're kind of listening to our conversation, our job is to normally travel the country full-time and do free Leave No Trace education all across the United States. Things are a little different this year. We are coming at you from our home base in Reno, Nevada, and we've been mostly focused on virtual workshops and education this year. So we haven't been out on the road as much, but we're still providing Leave No Trace education all across the country. And for those of you who are not super familiar with Leave No Trace itself, we are a national nonprofit and really an international movement. We have sister organizations in a bunch of different countries across the globe. And our main mission is just providing that opportunity for education, because if we don't know better, we can't do better. So we give people the chance to learn about how they can minimize their impacts, how they can protect the places that they love, and really just how they can be more sustainable in their everyday life and when they're enjoying the outdoors. And today we're going to focus, here's our email. If you feel like contacting us, we're going to have our email at the end as well. So don't feel like you need to write it down right now. But today we're going to focus on really how you can utilize Leave No Trace and how you can, do a bunch of different things with it in your programs and in your work. And it looks like Daryl is waving us down.
Would you all either make me host again or just start the video recording? I can't record.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
not a problem.
It booted me out of recording. I'm so
No
sorry.
problem.
Sorry.
No, you're all
problem.
good. Recording's going already, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, so we're good.
Awesome. Cool. So just real quick, we kind of want to cover what we're going to be talking about here today. Sorry, I skipped ahead a couple slides. We'll give you a background on Leave No Trace as a whole. We'll briefly cover the 7 principles, but we'll mostly show you all a few virtual and in-person activities that you can add to your repertoire and use to teach in whatever capacity in the future. We'll give you a bunch of resources and links so you can learn more and have those activities and things you may need to be effective educators. And then lastly, we'll save some time for questions, some of which we've already gotten, and the others you can drop in the chat or the Q&A function at any point, and we'll get to at the end. But for now, I kind of want to pose y'all a question, and I would like you all to type in the chat if you have an answer. But what do y'all think Leave No Trace means? If you were trying to define Leave No Trace, what do you think we're trying to encapsulate there with our organization's name?
Yeah, we'll give you a little bit of time. Don't worry, there's no wrong answers. It's not a quiz, but just let us know whatever you think Leave No Trace means.
Minimize impact on the environment. Absolutely. Pack it in, pack it out.
Picking up after yourself.
Engage responsibly with the outdoors so that they can flourish and continue to be enjoyed. Ooh, I like that one, Kara. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So something that's important to kind of think about when we're talking about all of Leave No Trace here today in our session is that, if we were truly leaving no trace, there'd be no roads, there'd be no campsites, there'd be, no access to these areas, no trails. So we're kind of striking a balance there, right? And that balance is humans interacting and enjoying nature, but not destroying it at the same time, because we can absolutely love places to death. And so that's where Leave No Trace comes in, right? We look at it and define it as the framework for making good decisions when you go outside. So it means you have all the knowledge, the skills, maybe even the gear that's going to help you minimize those impacts, pack everything out, respect wildlife, do all those things that are going to protect nature so that any environment, ecosystem, or situation you're faced with, you're going to be able to make a sound decision that's going to protect that space for the long term. So that's really what we're getting at, right? Leaving as little trace as possible, because leaving no trace is a pretty tough balancing act. And so that's what our aim is. Just doesn't look near as good on the side of a car.
Yeah. So there are a lot of impacts that happen in our outdoor spaces. And the majority of these impacts don't happen because people are intentionally causing them, because they're maliciously caused. They just happen because we're unaware or uninformed or sometimes even misinformed about how best to protect that place. A great example of this is feeding wildlife. A lot of visitors think that they're helping those animals by feeding wildlife and don't really realize the implications of that and the harm that it can do. So by providing opportunity for education through educating ourselves and then incorporating Leave No Trace into the work that we do, we are sharing this information with folks. We're empowering them to do what they can to protect these places. Our research actually tells us that 9 out of 10 people who visit outdoor spaces don't know about Leave No Trace and don't know about how they can minimize their impact. So the best place to start is really just providing that opportunity for education. And I keep talking about impacts, and that's really kind of where our focus is. That's what Leave No Trace is working to minimize, is the impacts that we cause through our outdoor recreation. And there are some kind of broad categories of impacts. These are really just the consequences of our actions, the way that we can alter or damage an ecosystem if we're not mindful. We can impact wildlife. You can see that there. That bird is pretty significantly impacted. We can impact soils through changing the composition of soil, through compacting it, impact vegetation through trampling, tree carving, picking wildflowers, all these kinds of things. Our campfires can be hugely impactful through wildfires, but also just through sterilizing soil and taking woody debris to burn. We can impact cultural resources. Anywhere that we recreate in the United States is the ancestral home of different indigenous communities. And if we're not mindful of that, we can cause a lot of damage to those resources and to kind of the sacred aspects of those areas. And then we can also impact water. Most of our outdoor recreation actually takes place on waterways, and we can cause a lot of contamination and pollution to those areas if we aren't careful. And then the final one is one we think a lot less about, but is still really important, and that is our impact to other visitors. We can alter people's experiences, kind of change their ability to get the benefits from nature through things like overcrowding, noise pollution, user conflicts. And the outdoors are for everyone. And we really want to strive to create a place where everyone feels safe and welcome and can get those benefits. So we're going to show you some photos of impacts. And what I want you to do is let me know in the chat how these photos make you feel, if they make you feel anything. Do they make you excited to go outside? Do they make you happy? Do they maybe have an opposite reaction? Let me know in the chat how these photos make you feel. So we've got frustrated, yeah, unacceptable. This one here with all of this carving in the sandstone, this one really bothers me. We've got sad, disgusted. This is a lovely photo of a bunch of burned aluminum cans, worried, sorrowful.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. So the water one makes me sick. So much work having to do that river cleanup. Absolutely. So the reason why we have emotional reactions to these photos is because whether or not we've ever thought about it before, we have an outdoor ethic. So our full name as an organization is the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics. We are not called the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Rules. We are not trying to just give everyone rules for how we should go outside. We're trying to build personal and collective outdoor ethics. And I like to think of my ethic as what I do when no one's watching, when there's no external influence, how I decide what's acceptable and not acceptable to me in that space. And we each have an ethic. It's personal and unique to us. And it's based on our experiences, our access to education and opportunities to learn about these spaces. And we can strengthen our outdoor ethic, and we can also share that with others so that they're able to strengthen theirs as well. We all have to learn somewhere, and by building this kind of collective outdoor ethic, we can do a lot to improve the health of these spaces.
And that's really important as outdoor educators, right? Y'all are informing some of people's first opinions and ideas about nature. And if we can build that ethic in, because the fact that y'all are here shows that maybe your ethic, has already been built up a little bit, and we can easily spread that to others. And that's a big takeaway from this. And the reason that ethic is so important and why we want to create a collective outdoor ethic is because of the sheer number of us going outside. So this data is a couple years old, but trends have largely been flat. We're seeing about these same exact numbers year after year of visitation to our public lands in the United States. And this is a significant graph in itself. But if we add municipal and city parks to this number, we end up with a total of 13 billion with a B visits to our outdoor spaces. Now, obviously, that's more people on the earth. So that includes repeat visitors and international visitors, but 13 billion visits to all of our natural spaces in the United States. And we call that those cumulative impacts, right? When we're all having little effects on the outdoors and they add up over time, it is significantly huge. And it can easily take an undeveloped area and change it slowly over time with all these little things happening, so that after a while, we end up with something that is significantly developed and built up, and we've changed that outdoor space. Now, that isn't terrible in itself. Some places we're going to need campsites and trails and places that are developed, but we want to make sure this doesn't spread and happen to all of our outdoor spaces, that everywhere is trampled, that vegetation doesn't survive largely in parks and things. And so that's where Leave No Trace really comes into effect, is those cumulative impacts. It's never just us in one day. It's every single day of the week, all year round, that these places are being affected. And it puts it in a little bit of context for us in the outdoors. It's also important to talk about how not only Leave No Trace reaches people. You can see us in the bottom left corner there, traveling trainers with our little Subaru crossing around, but also you all are a critical piece of this puzzle, right? Leave No Trace and that collective outdoor ethic goes nowhere if it's just us in the corner. We can have a lot of effect in teaching others, but you all can have a huge expansive effect as well. And it's really important that we are using every avenue to teach people about how they can protect nature.
So we just want to mention a couple more things before we actually dive into the 7 principles and specifically ways to teach them. The first of those is that Leave No Trace is a spectrum. So on one side, we have significant impacts. On the other, we have few impacts. And we all fall somewhere on this spectrum. The important part isn't where we fall. It's that anytime we do anything to practice Leave No Trace, we're moving towards that greener side. And just like there are cumulative impacts, we can have cumulative benefits. So it's not about 100 people practicing Leave No Trace perfectly. It's about thousands and thousands of us practicing it imperfectly. And that's where we really see the benefit of it. The final thing I want to mention before we get into those 7 principles is that we are a research and science-based organization. So what I mean by that is all of these 7 principles, the practices behind them, they are based in that science and research. So an example of this, if you've ever heard about cat holes, the holes we need to bury our solid human waste in, they are supposed to be 6 to 8 inches deep. And that's not just some number that we made up. It is because some poor grad student had the job of burying human waste at different levels and digging it up periodically to find out what layer of soil has the most microbes and will break down our human waste the fastest.
Not a job I want to have.
Yeah, not a job I want to have, but now thanks to that grad student, we have really great numbers. That study has been replicated and done in different environments too, so we can really understand what is actually going to be the best way to minimize our impacts. We are going to share some resources at the end, and some of those resources include that science and research. So if you're really interested in it, you can dive into that. And we also like to use this as a teaching tool, because making things concrete for people and giving them something to know that this is actually effective makes them a lot more likely to adopt these practices into their own outdoor habits.
So all that science and research led us to the 7 principles of Leave No Trace. A lot of you have probably heard of the 7 principles. They've been our core, teaching tenet for upwards of 20-something years now. And they can be a little tricky to remember, but they have a lot of information to gain, even from the names. So we're going to teach you all an awesome mnemonic. We should have just gotten giant on your screen here. We can see a handful of you, so we hope you'll do this along with us. But these are the 7 principles hand signals.
Yeah, so go ahead and get your fingers out, give them a
good stretch there.
Yeah.
And we're going to go through these, and it's a great way to remember the 7 principles and to teach them to others, especially youth. Kids love doing the hand signals.
Yeah, and those of you we can't see, still practice with us. You can get as weird as you want. But we're going to go ahead and show you those 7 principles hand signals.
So our first principle, we're going to think about our trip, maybe take any notes we might need and plan ahead and prepare.
Yeah, so we make that number 1. We want to make sure we know the weather, the proper things for that ecosystem, for that park, that we're maybe letting someone know where we're going, that we're packing all our proper gear, we're planning ahead and preparing.
That second principle, we're going to travel and camp on durable surfaces.
Yeah, so we're sticking to all those trails. We're camping in established campsites. And if we're going outside of those areas, we know how to do so in the least impactful way for that environment.
Our third principle, we're going to dispose of waste properly by digging those cat holes with our trowel or tossing our waste into a recycling bin, right?
Yeah, and there are 3 types of waste we want to know how to dispose of. We want to know how to dispose of our litter, our human waste, and any gray water we might have from maybe washing ourselves or our dishes. And if we don't dispose of those things properly, they can contaminate and pollute an area. So we want to make sure we're throwing them away or digging those cat holes.
Fourth principle is where it gets tricky. 2 twos. We're going to make a camera, take only pictures, leave only footprints, break only wind, and we're going to leave what we find.
Yeah. Everything we find in nature has a role to play there, either in the ecosystem or in the story of that place. So we want to leave those things so they can continue to play that role and so that others can enjoy them afterwards. That's not to say that traditional gathering or even foraging can't happen, but we want to know how to do that in the least impactful way. So we can take all of those photos of those places and leave what we find.
Our 5th principle, our hand becomes our flames here, and we're going to minimize our campfire impacts.
Yeah, as I said before, campfires can be hugely impactful. Around 80 to 90% of our wildfires in the US are human caused, but it's not just wildfires. We just want to know how to have a safe fire, how to put out a fire, and be aware that there are alternatives and we don't always have to have a campfire.
Our 6th principle, we get 2 threes and they become our antlers, and we're going to respect wildlife.
Anytime we go outside, we're in wildlife's home and we want to be respectful of them by keeping a safe distance, by never feeding them. These things are going to keep us safe and keep them safe.
And our last principle, we're going to wave, maybe give a peace sign or a hang loose on our West Coast here to all those other visitors and be considerate to other visitors.
Yeah, as I said before, the outdoors are for everyone, and we really need to strive to create an inclusive, safe space where everyone can come do their outdoor activity, get the benefits from nature, and we can share these places because we are making a lot more people, but we are not making a lot more land. So we need to make sure we share what we have.
Awesome. So those are the 7 principles hand signals. You may be chuckling now, but in a week when you remember them because of that, you're welcome.
Yeah. We do also have a video of those on our video library and on our website. So if you want to share those with others, or if you maybe forget what one of them were, you can always check back in. But we are going to transition to talking about how we can teach these 7 principles. And we aren't going to focus on really diving into all of them. If you haven't been able to learn about the 7 principles, we have an online course that you can take that really kind of goes in depth to them. But we want to focus on giving you all tools to teach and spread and incorporate these principles into the work that you do.
Yeah, we figure you all are perfectly capable of, reading and learning activities to adopt, but we want to show you how we've been adjusting to, the virtual teaching sphere and how these translate to in-person activities where safe.
Yeah, so we're going to demonstrate some kind of virtual ways you can do these and then also tell you about ways to teach them in person.
So we're going to cruise along to that 2nd principle, right? And we're going to travel and camp on durable surfaces. And the first thing we're going to do is we want to make sure we kind of talk about what this is even referring to, right? Everywhere we go outside, everywhere we camp, everywhere we hike, bike, or just move across a landscape, we have an effect on it, especially in high numbers, right? You think about some of these national parks that have upwards of 4, 5, 6 million people a year. Even just our walking can have significant effects. So we want to talk about that middle, that big word in the title there, right? Durability. We define durability as the ability of a material or vegetation to withstand human trampling and bounce back afterwards. And so no matter what we're doing, we want to aim for concentrating our activity on the most durable surface possible, right? In most cases, that's going to be a trail, that's going to be a campsite or a roadway. But there are times when going off trail is allowed and acceptable, and we want to know how to best be prepared for that. Sometimes you need to go to the bathroom off trail, or you need to go pump some water for maybe your dinner or something, and that requires you to go off trail. But we want to make sure we're sticking to the strongest and most durable surfaces possible when we do that, and knowing what ecosystem may throw some curveballs at us as well.
And whenever we're teaching this principle, it's really important to define that word durable, especially if we're working with kids. You can even adjust your language a little to be easier for them to understand, but it's always important to just define that word so that we're all working on the same page.
Yeah, I always like to say a really strong surface. Kids really get strong extremely well. And with that, we're going to explore some more surfaces. We like to fine tune this usually to the area we're at, but since we're from all over, we just have a variety of surfaces today. We're going to play a game I like to call Durable or Not Durable. And what I would like you to do when I show you some surfaces here is tell me whether it's durable or not, whether we'd want to maybe hike, camp, or anything else on that surface. And then more importantly, I want you to type out why as well. That's a really important part. So our first one may seem easy, durable or not durable, but I want you all to tell me which one of those it is and why.
Yeah, so our first one here is rock. So let us know durable or not durable and why. And the why is one of the most important kind of key pieces in any Leave No Trace education. If we can explain the why, but more importantly, if we can help the people we're teaching, our participants, understand and kind of come to their own conclusion about the why, we're going to really go a long way in making this something that they incorporate into their own practices, into their own behaviors.
Durable, won't corrode, erode, absolutely durable. There's no vegetation to trample. That's an important point there.
Yeah, someone else said there's no marks left behind. Yeah, we can't really see where we've been.
So y'all are on the right track. Largely, rock is a very durable surface, right? It doesn't need to bounce back. That's a great point, Lori. So we actually call rock a resistant surface instead of resilient, meaning that it will get slowly damaged, but it may take millions and millions of footfalls before that rock even wears down a teeny bit. But that also depends on the type of rock, right? Wet sandstone maybe erodes a little quicker than granite, and so we'd want to think about that if we were in the desert Southwest. What if there's plants on that rock? You know, thinking about those things are really important as well. And so the why there is that rock is durable unless we're in certain circumstances. And it relies on us doing our planning ahead and preparing to make sure that we are choosing rock that is going to be able to withstand our human trampling.
So as Bryce was kind of mentioning, there are some caveats though. So our next one here is lichen and moss. So this lichen and moss in the photo is on a piece of wood, but if this was on a rock, what do we think? Is this going to be durable or not durable? And again, let us know why you think that. For lichen and moss.
Not durable, all right.
We've got not durable. Remember to let us know that why too. So,
most of the moss and lichen are fragile.
Yeah, very fragile. Takes a long time to grow back. Yeah, absolutely. Lichen is super interesting because it actually aids in breaking down rock so that it actually can become dirt at some point in millions of years.
Zach just referred to that.
Yeah, but without that, then we're not going to have dirt and soils and things like that. So it's a really important piece of our process. Not durable. On peaks, other vegetation can't grow up high. Absolutely. Lots of moss and lichen can grow at high alpine areas where they are very sensitive, they grow very slowly, and even just a few footsteps can do a lot of damage. Not durable, can easily be taken off, removed, absolutely. So this is going to be a non-durable surface, even if it's on a more durable surface like a log or rock or something like that, we can still cause a lot of damage to it. And with all of these durable surfaces, most of the time, they're pretty self-explanatory when we actually ask people to just stop and think about it for a little bit. It's pretty common that everyone's going to come to the right conclusion, but just giving folks the opportunity to stop and think, is this something I could damage, is really important, and it helps them go through that decision-making process, because we're not going to be with them on every trip into the outdoors. We're not going to cover every surface, but by talking through the decision-making with them, we can give them the tools to even kind of question new surfaces that they might come up against when they're out hiking, camping, doing whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah, lichen, especially lichen, is a big one, big wide. It can take up to 5 years to even grow a centimeter for some species of lichen. And that's a long time for 1 foot step to possibly wipe them out. All right, our next surface, you're on a mud puddle, or I'm sorry, you're hiking down a trail and you run into a mud puddle. Do you go through it or around it? What do y'all think?
Yeah.
Let me know in the chat.
Yeah, through it or around it, and then same thing, let us know why. So this one's a little tricky. It's not durable or not durable. It's through it or around it.
What do y'all think?
And if you're not sure, feel free to guess. We do welcome guesses.
Through it. You don't want to expand the sides of the trail. Go through it, through it.
Awesome,
It's
yeah.
the trail. Don't want to further. All right, y'all are rock stars.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say impressive. So the X maybe shouldn't be there, but we want to go through it and not around it, right? So if we go around it, we're gonna slowly expand the footprint of that trail. If you've ever been hiking along and all of a sudden the trail hits a low spot and turns 30 feet wide, that's typically because there's a mud puddle there when it's wet and people are going around over and over. And that increases vegetation damage, expands the trail, makes it unsightly, all these things that we want to try to avoid, especially in those high use areas.
Yeah, and I would wager that we've got a few people who have maybe been on trail crews before and done some trail work. So that's kind of why we knew this right away, but this is a very common misconception. A lot of times people go around the mud puddle and they do it because, like we talked about earlier, they think that that is the best way to protect that area. They think that by going through the mud, they're going to damage the trail more. So again, it's just an opportunity to provide that education, because a lot of impacts happen not because they're intentional, but because people are trying to do the right thing. They just have some misinformation about what the best way to leave no trace is.
Yeah, this question with the general public workshop can get a very different set of answers.
So we have one more surface for you, and that is pine duff. So durable or not durable, and let us know why. This could also be leaf litter. That's pretty similar if you're in an area that is more leafy trees and less pine trees. But anytime we have that kind of covering on the ground with a bunch of pine needles, a bunch of leaf litter, is it durable or not durable?
Could I pitch my tent on there and spend the night under a pine tree?
Yeah, what do you think? And if you're not sure, feel free to guess. That's totally fine too.
We grade on a curve here at Leave No Trace. So. Durable in most cases.
Yeah, durable in most cases.
Absolutely. Hank, yeah, durable as well.
Durable because it's soft and bouncy, yeah. So for the most part, these types of areas are going to protect the ground underneath, and they also generally occur in areas where there's not really much vegetation. It's usually dropped kind of right below those trees where there's not much other vegetation. And unless there's kind of saplings growing in, we can try to avoid those. These are going to be really durable areas, a good spot to camp, a good spot to kind of take a break off the trail, and a good spot to kind of concentrate our travel if we are hiking off trail to go to the bathroom, go get water, anything like that. But with all of these surfaces, and with all of Leave No Trace, really, there is nuance. So that's why it's part of that's why it's important just to encourage folks to make their own decisions in different spaces. We want to build up the kind of confidence that people can make decisions when they're in an area, but it might change depending on the weather, depending on the ecosystem that we're in. So we just want to create that opportunity to make those decisions. So there is another piece of durable surfaces, travel and camp on durable surfaces, And that is the idea of when to concentrate our impacts and when to disperse them. So concentrating our impacts is what you see here. It's when we hike on trails, when we camp in established campsites. There can be thousands and thousands of people who hike on this trail, and it's not really going to be further damaged. There might be some widening. You can even kind of see down towards where the kids are running. There's some trails kind of branching off on the side because we're walking wider than the trail. Maybe we're going around mud puddles. But for the most part, we can use this and concentrate all of our impacts on this spot, and we're not really going to further damage it. But if we are going off of that trail and we're going in a less developed area, we actually want to disperse our impacts. So we want to all spread out so that no one area is receiving repeated footfalls. If we're camping, we'd maybe want to move our tent nightly so that no one spot is getting multiple nights of camping. Research actually tells us that as few as 25 passes is enough to create a new trail on most types of vegetation, and as few as 12 nights of camping a year is enough to really damage that vegetation and compact the soil so that it's not going to easily recover. So you can see this here in this activity that we like to do called a field walk. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but this is something you can do in person to teach this concept. We spread out in an area, and you can tell that there's really no mark left behind. You can't really see where those folks have traveled. But when they step in each other's footsteps and go in that single file line and concentrate their impacts, it's really clear the mark that they're leaving behind. Yeah, social distancing, exactly. We want to spread out and make sure that no one spot is getting those repeated footfalls.
Absolutely. So those are some of the core tenets that are important to teach during, travel and camp on durable surfaces. This can be done with a variety of mechanisms, working with these surface cards specifically. In online formats, you can make games, Google Slides out of them, just talk about the surfaces in a chat format like we did. In person, there are even more ways to utilize these activities. Putting the surfaces into a matching game, trying to organize them from least durable to most durable in a scale. All sorts of ways to utilize these and talk about that important wrap-up point, the why. We want to choose the most durable surfaces, concentrate our activity when we're in high-use areas, and disperse it when we're in undeveloped areas as well.
Yeah, and we did get, just in our kind of previous questions before we even started today, we did have some folks asking about how young is the right time to start teaching Leave No Trace, or how to work with kids in particular. And generally, we work with kids in about 3rd grade and up. We have worked with kids younger than that, and it's just, we do slightly different activities with them. At that point, it's more about connecting them to nature.
Yeah, just having fun with nature, and forming a connection, and then adjusting to where you're learning the more in-depth concepts.
Yeah, but our focus is really about 3rd grade and up. And with these kinds of surface cards, they are a really easy activity to do even with younger kids, because as I was mentioning before, it's pretty intuitive. Once we start asking those questions, even kids are able to really come to the most Leave No Trace conclusions and really understand and kind of analyze these surfaces. So another great activity we do in person is that field walk. So just like that kind of GIF was showing, we actually go out into a field and we test this out, creating an opportunity where people can really test these things out, where they can come to their own conclusions about it and see it in action, is really powerful and is going to really be the best opportunity for that kind of long-term behavior change and really having people incorporate these things. If you don't have access to a field, we can do this activity on a whiteboard, or even just showing that GIF. That's another thing that we have that you all can use. We have a video library that is available for you to use, so you can still provide that visual. And if you go out in those areas and do a field walk, you can also kind of fluff up the grass on your way back so that you don't leave that lasting impact. You also can teach about how we can kind of
mitigate that,
mitigate that impact once it's caused. And then the final activity that we want to share with you all for this principle is called Worm's Eye View. And this is a great activity for getting people really hands-on investigating and interacting with nature. So we give participants a piece of rope tied in a circle, as you can see here, And we send them out to put that rope down on the ground on a bunch of different surfaces and count how many living things they can see within the rope, to take notes about what that surface looks like, what they notice about it, and then based on all those observations, tell us what surfaces they found that were durable and which ones were non-durable. And same thing, we can do this with adults or with kids. And this group here is, I believe, probably around third, fourth grade.
Fourth graders, I believe, yeah.
And they got it very easily, giving them that opportunity to see nature really up close and personal, to count the bugs they can find, to see what species of plants they see in that circle, and tell us what's durable and what's not durable, is a really great way to have people, again, come to their own conclusions about these things.
For those of you who may be frantically trying to take notes for these activities, names and things, we will be sharing some links after that take you to books where all the activities are, instructions, and a bunch of free links as well that have the cards and instructions as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. But beyond that, we're going to cruise along to that third principle. Those of you who remember those signals, we're going to dig those cat holes, dispose of our waste properly. And Aaron mentioned that there are three main categories of waste. It's our litter and our trash, right? It's our gray water, and then our human waste, our poop and pee. We have to know how to deal with that in the outdoors as well. Today, we're just going to briefly cruise through just the first part, litter and trash. Like we said, we have a 5-day field-based course, and even then we can't cover everything about Leave No Trace, so we're really condensing it down for y'all. But with that, we want to talk a little bit more about litter and that why piece. So I want you all in the chat to let me know how long you think this piece of litter might last if we just left it out on the side of the trail. How long would an orange or banana peel take to completely biodegrade, to completely decompose on the side of a trail?
So we've got 3 years is our first guess.
1 year, not bad.
I will tell you that the study that we use tried to simulate an average ecosystem, an average climate. In desert environments, this photo was taken in Death Valley. It's going to be even longer for all of these items. And in more humid, wet climates, it's going to be a little bit shorter. But we've got
5 years.
3 years, 5 years.
Too long?
Too long, yeah. So you're all pretty much on the right track.
Up to 2 years. And some of you probably know because you've picked up many mummified orange and banana peels from your outdoor excursions. And this is one of those instances where maybe people just really don't realize the effects that little things like this can have. And the biggest part is orange and banana peels end up affecting wildlife significantly. They can become food habituated and used to humans feeding them. It's not their natural food, so it's not good for their immune system. It doesn't have the nutrients they need. And so even though these things are biodegradable, they are natural, they are going to eventually really have an effect on wildlife. And that's why we still want to pack all this out. It's one of the biggest misconceptions about Leave No Trace as a whole. A lot of people think tossing out sunflower seeds and peanut shells is not a big deal because it's helping wildlife, when in actuality, it's really doing significant harm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've actually met park rangers who let us know that they've had bears come into campsites solely because there were barbecue flavored sunflower seed shells, and that was enough to attract a bear to that campsite. So even those small things can still have an effect. Our next piece of trash is an aluminum can. So let us know in the chat, how long does an aluminum can take to totally break down? In the beginning, when we were looking at those photos of impacts, there was that one photo of all of those aluminum cans in the fire pit. They're really commonly thrown into fire pits. Same thing with aluminum foil, but they actually don't burn completely.
1,000 years?
They will just leave tiny droplets of aluminum in the bottom.
20 plus.
And they also release carcinogens, so cancer-causing chemicals into the air. So we've got, 1,000 years, 50 years, 20 years. We're all, again, pretty close on the same track. It's about 80 to 100 years for aluminum cans to totally break down. And these numbers are also going to be similar when they go to a landfill, so still 80 to 100 years. But aluminum is actually endlessly recyclable, which is pretty cool. Things like plastic can only be recycled 1 or maybe 2 times, but aluminum can be recycled endlessly, and it only takes about 3 months for a can to be recycled and then be back on the shelf as another aluminum can. So much better to get these to a recycling, or at the very least pack them out so they aren't lasting 80 to 100 years on the side of a river or a trail.
All right, next piece, disposable diaper. Let us all know, or let us know how long you think this one might last. For those of you who are like, does this really happen? Absolutely. The day we took this picture, we actually found 6 diapers along this side of a river in the desert. So it totally happens. And a lot of times it happens because people think they're gross. They don't want to put a nice steamy diaper in their backpack and carry it out in the heat for an hour, right? And so that's why a lot of things get left behind, is because people maybe don't want to pack them out or aren't equipped to pack them out. We got 5 years, 100 years, 3 years, 10 years.
For things like disposable diapers or pads and tampons or toilet paper, like Bryce was saying, they are kind of gross and people don't know how to pack them out. So giving people a low cost, easy solution is going to go a long way. We like to suggest a FOPO bag. It stands for Fear of Packing Out, and it is just a Ziploc bag that's wrapped in duct tape. We made this one with the Girl Scouts, so it has a lot of fun stickers on it as well. But as you can see, you could put any trash in there. You don't have to see it, so you get some privacy. You don't have to look at the gross trash. You can seal the bag, so once it goes in your backpack, nothing's gonna get out and get on anything else. And then when you get to a trash can, you can dump it out and then reuse this as your kind of pack out bag or FOPO bag so that that trash isn't left, because it lasts. Wrong way.
Wrong way. I'm going to give it to you, Lauren. I'm going to round up. 450 years is quite a significant amount of time. Now, some of you may be going, well, we don't have disposable diapers and we haven't had them that long. This study was done by putting these items in hyperbaric chambers and then taking carbon half-lives from them and estimating how long they would last. So pretty decent certainty of last a lot longer than we'd like.
Yeah, so 450 years is significant. So giving people options for packing these things out is going to go a long way. They don't just have all of those plastics and synthetic materials, they also have human waste in them, which has about 100 active bacteria, pathogens, and protozoan that can contaminate water and spread disease. So really important that those are packed out. But as we've got a couple guesses already, we've got our last piece of trash here, a plastic bottle.
250, never. We got 1,000.
1,000, 250. So I will give you all a hint. These are all getting progressively higher. So it's
Again,
at least higher than 450 years.
Lifetime.
Lifetime, yeah. So we've got a couple of right answers there. It is indefinitely.
Dun,
So
dun, dun.
plastic, there are some varying types of plastic made of different materials, but for the most part, they last indefinitely. They never really go away. Plastic doesn't biodegrade, so it doesn't break down kind of organically. It photodegrades, meaning that the sun just breaks it down. And all that happens is it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until it becomes microplastics. Yeah, we've got someone in the chat already. So plastic will break down into microplastics, which you've probably heard a lot about. They're really commonly associated with the ocean. But as they've been studied more and more in recent years, they have been found in almost all riverways. They've been found in the air, in fish, and even in rain. In Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado, a couple of years ago, there was a study done collecting rainwater, and 80% of the rainwater collected contained microplastics. So plastic pollution is far-reaching and it has significant consequences. It's not all from our plastic litter. There's industrial plastics, there's microfibers from our clothing. There's a lot of things contaminating these areas, but we want to do our part to minimize our use of plastic and to ensure it's not left behind in these outdoor areas. It's not just that it lasts forever. It also has a significant effect on wildlife. Way back in the beginning of our presentation, we had that photo of a bird with the fishing line wrapped around its beak. Fishing line is a little different. It lasts about 600 years, but most commonly birds and other animals will get tangled in fishing line or they'll ingest plastic. And because neither of these things break down in a reasonable time frame, it results in the death of that animal because they either are tangled and they can't eat, or these things are in their stomach and they stop eating because they think they're full, or they stop eating because they just can't digest anything. And it has a significant effect on animals. The California condor, for example, is a really awesome species that has been on the endangered list for a very long time. They were making a comeback recently, but they've started to taper off again because the chicks are being fed microplastics and not making it to adulthood. So it's really important we're mindful of our use of plastic and we're not leaving these things in our environments. So all of these items they're part of an activity that we're going to share with you all. And within that activity, there are even more trash items. So if there's litter you see really commonly in the areas you work, you can hopefully find those ones out and use them as an educational tool.
Yeah, it's really important, right? Because even kids will understand the importance of why litter needs to be handled and why we need to make sure it doesn't end up not only in the outdoors but in our landfills as well. You know, there, like Aaron said, there are a lot more different items in this activity, and we'll share those cards and things with you afterwards. But it really makes things a lot more concrete, right? We've all been taught since we were young kids, probably kindergarten, not to be litter bugs. But a lot of times we're not taught that why part of how long it affects and what it affects in the second piece of that puzzle there. So we are going to really quickly cover respect wildlife, mostly just to show you all one of the videos and how that can be a great teaching tool as well.
Yeah, so this is our last principle we're going to talk about, respect wildlife. And as I mentioned, we're in their home when we're outside. We want to be respectful of that. And there are three main things that we can do to be respectful. This is one of our free videos. These are a free video or a free resource you all can use for virtual trainings, for social media, for really anything you want. But the first thing we want to do is observe them from a distance. So a quick way to tell if we're a safe distance is by using our thumb trick, as she's doing in the video here. We'll cover this a little bit more in depth in a minute, but basically if you can cover that animal with your thumb, you're probably a safe distance away. We also want to make sure we never feed them. This is because our human food has significant effects on them. It can cause them to lose their fear of humans, to think of us as a food source, which then can lead them to become aggressive and have to be euthanized or relocated because they're so aggressive. It can also just damage their natural behaviors. Sometimes they will stop foraging for food naturally. It can delay hibernation and migration. So in order to make sure we never feed them, we want to store our food, trash, and smellables securely. It's going to depend on the area we're in, how we need to store that. It could be a bear can, or it could just be leaving it in our car. It's going to depend on the area we're in and the wildlife there. But doing those three things is going to go a long way in respecting wildlife and keeping them safe. So just kind of a little bit of a recap there. The first thing we wanted to do is keep our distance. So using the thumb trick, and you hold out your arms straight in front of you. You don't want any bend in your elbow. You can close or cover one eye, and then you try to cover that animal with your thumb. So we've got an animal here you can practice with. I would need to be like all the way out of the room in order to cover this big guy here. But we want to be able to totally cover that animal. If it's a small animal, you can be a little closer, but that is what we call our thumb trick. And again, we want to talk about the why with this as well. If we aren't doing these things, if we aren't being respectful of wildlife, we can cause a lot of issues for them. We can affect their health, their behaviors, and ecosystems are a web. And if one kind of section of that ecosystem is damaged or altered, it can affect that entire area. So it's really important that we are respectful of wildlife, that we're keeping our food away from them, we're keeping our distance so that that area can continue to thrive.
I think, this slide actually answers Leah's question as best we could, is that, it's really giving these folks as many whys as you can, right? What might speak to them is it actually doesn't, it harms the wildlife. Here's the studies that show how it affects their vitamin C and other levels. It is the biggest source of rabies in the United States, and people getting diseases from wildlife is feeding them. And just really trying to make it hit home that if you care about the wildlife, the best thing we can do is to leave them alone, as much as that seems counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even things like ducks in our local city park, us feeding them can have a lot of negative consequences. So it's important to apply these things, whether we're in a national park or whether we're in our local city park.
So with that, we want to let you all have the opportunity to send us questions. We're in our last 10 minutes. While you're typing out those questions in either the Q&A or the chat, we'll see it in either. We're going to drop a whole ton of links for y'all in the chat of all those things we've been talking about today. Copy, paste that somewhere else so that you have them all handy. And we're going to kind of detail what those are real quick.
But yeah, if you have questions, feel free, now is your chance to type those into the chat.
So feel free to work with the traveling trainers. We do hundreds of free educational workshops all around the country. You've probably seen, that Subaru and a lot of other partners help fund us doing free education nationwide all year round. On a normal year, non-COVID year, we're able to educate upwards of 16 million people between all of our traveling teams. And like we said, there's still 9 out of 10 people who don't have that Leave No Trace education. So we still have a long way to go.
But yeah, you can request to do a training or a workshop with us. They're all free. And we would love to work with your group if you work for a university or outfitter and guide or whatever it is that your organization does.
There's a lot more training opportunities. We're doing a real quick awareness workshop today, but there are 2 and 5 day courses that really get you set up to be a Leave No Trace expert and teach it. They also look great on a resume if you're looking to work in the outdoor industry. We did have a question talking about whether we're going to have more virtual resources for these. We do have virtual versions of both the trainer and master educator course. And those resources have been somewhat refined. We haven't put all of them out for public use quite yet, but stay tuned, and anything we can share in regards to those, we will.
Yeah, there is a link that is for the training section on our website, and that's where the schedule of these trainings lives. So that is the best place, a one-stop shop, to see when courses are happening, both virtual and in person. There are some in-person master educator courses happening. Virtual master educator courses are pretty limited because we only do them with our course providers. So we don't do them specifically in-house. I'd have to check on that, I think, but if there are any planned and in the works, they'll be on that section on our website.
We can follow up with you on that, Daryl. And then lastly, we went through a couple activities, but there are hundreds of activities that Leave No Trace has worked on and put into a literature the last 20 years, including a few books and one of our favorites, which is Bigfoot's Playbook. It's mostly youth-based activities, and it comes with all of the teaching materials you might need, including all the printouts, the handouts, and instructions. If you could get one Leave No Trace booklet for education for both youth and adults, it's Bigfoot's Playbook. We use it every day, all the time.
Yeah, and it's only about $10. And then other than that, there are a lot of free activities that you can just download on our website as well. And aside from that, as we mentioned a couple times, we have a massive video library. These are free for you to use either for virtual programs, to put on social media, to put on a website, or just to refresh your own knowledge. Maybe you haven't done a bear hang in a couple years and you want to remember how to do it. There's a video there for you to practice that skill. And then lastly, we have 2 newsletters. There is a youth educator newsletter. So if you work at a camp or a nature center, this is awesome for you. It's just quarterly, but there are resources, there's activities, there's highlighting what other folks in the community are doing. And then there's just our general newsletter that is updates on research, updates on programs that we have maybe in your local area. And both of those are a great way to kind of stay involved and stay up to date with Leave No Trace. But other than that, we want to have some time to answer your questions if you have any.
There's a couple in the Q&A we'll try to get to, but if you have any others, please feel free to type them in now, or you can always email them to us if you want to take this conversation offline, if you're more comfortable that way as well.
Yeah, we did have a couple of questions, and these were kind of left beforehand, before our workshop today, but specifically about how do we talk to people that we see on the trail doing less than Leave No Trace things. And in those replies, a couple folks mentioned authority of the resource, which is really the best way to communicate. There's a lot of information about this on our website, but the small piece of it and the most important piece is you want to speak to that person objectively. So rather than come up to them and say, hey, I saw you littering. You did that wrong, and kind of finger pointing and placing the blame on that person. Change your language just a little bit to be more objective, and instead say, hey, I've noticed some litter on the trail. That small change in language goes a long way in keeping the situation from becoming you two against each other, keeps that person from becoming defensive, and really opens up the conversation to just be more educational. You're not attacking them, you're just addressing the issue. So that small change in language goes a long way.
We got two great questions. I want to make sure we make it to both of them. Seth just asked, hammocks are huge recently. How have we addressed the impacts of the growing outdoor trends? So hammocks, they can be, right? A lot of places have seen significant effects from them. Usually the hammock impacts we see are girdling of trees. So the biggest single thing you can do to hammock responsibly is to make sure that you have at least 1 inch or larger width of straps, those tree saver straps on a tree. Make sure that tree is at least 6 inches or bigger in diameter. If we can make those two things, the biggest impact of hammock camping is going to go away. But if done correctly, hammock camping can actually be more leave no trace than tent camping. If we pick a durable surface to have our hammock above, we're using tree saver straps, we're likely not impacting the ground hardly at all. So it can be more leave no trace to hammock camp, but it just depends on doing those few things correctly.
Yeah. And just kind of, oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Just kind of generally too, with your question about how are we impacting kind of growing outdoor trends, or how are we addressing them? We are working a lot to continue to do research. So for example, we have a study in the works about studying how social media is affecting outdoor spaces. We have very recently done more studies about things like hammocking or like bouldering, things that are kind of getting exponentially more popular so that we can really understand those things. And we also try to work with gear companies, with outfitters and guides. Specifically for hammocks, we work with Eno. They're a very large hammock provider, so that they can provide that information to folks when they purchase a hammock about how to hammock responsibly or hammock in a leave no trace way. So we try to come at it from a lot of different angles, especially when there are these kind of new trends blowing up really quickly, and the education and even the management of these areas haven't really caught up to those things.
Yeah, rock climbing is one of those right now. It's becoming hugely popular. The next question we have here, where do you draw the line for impacted versus unimpacted ground? If the ground is kind of sort of has a trail and you're not sure if it's able to bounce back. So remember those numbers Aaron was talking about. They're not for every ecosystem, but largely up to 25 passes, that's not even a ton, can start to make a new trail that's going to take at least a year or two to rehabilitate. And so thinking about that, if we see what looks like a trail that is just barely starting to be evident that it's there, we may want to avoid that because it's just going to be human nature for people to be more and more drawn there. There's a reason that the most common tactic, that land managers use to kind of disguise where a place is at is to block it off visually so that humans aren't drawn there. Because once it starts to slightly happen, it's just humans being drawn for another view or something. So we want to make sure that it is, sorry, one second, that we are just thinking about, what stage that is and adjusting our behavior if we need to, and picking a surface that is maybe more resilient.
Yeah. We only have about 2 minutes left. We don't want to take up any.
Our room may close automatically at 3. I'm not sure.
But we hope that answered your questions. Again, if you have further questions, since we only have about 2 minutes left, feel free to send us an email. We would be happy to talk to you all. And we hope you're able to put these resources into action, because Leave No Trace really doesn't go anywhere if it's just Bryce and I talking to our computer. What's going to make the difference is all of you folks putting it into action in your programs in the areas that you get outdoors. So we appreciate you spending part of your afternoon with us, and we hope you have a great rest of the conference.
Yeah, appreciate you spreading this Leave No Trace ethic, right? When we get to go enjoy all these places around the country, we know they're taken care of a little better because of all your help.
Thank you, Aaron and Bryce. Y'all are great presenters. It's almost like you've done this before.
Yeah.
You're really great at this, and I really appreciate you sharing all this with us today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for
Yeah,
being here.
thank
Drop us a
you.
line if you need anything else, and have fun at the rest of the conference. We're excited for the last few sessions here. So
And I hope you will all join in some of those other sessions. And it's going to be interesting to me to see if this automatically closes or not, because I was in one that did. It just went boop. I'm going to say it's not.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. And thank you again so much.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, your host. I can't close it up.
Oh, yeah,
we'll
close it
close
up.
for you. All right.
All
Thank you,
right.
All right,
everyone.
thank you.